Yes, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Let me share my screen somehow. There. Do you all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. All right, let me get started. So wait, I have to close some things, excuse me. All right, so hi everyone. I'm back with another short demo to show you what I've been working on. If you remember from last time, I've been investigating ways to achieve real-time collaboration between language workbenches, and the specific use case I'm working with are the workbenches Jetbrains MPS and Spoofax within Eclipse. And I mentioned during my last demo in April that I had come up with a method to link these two, and I've come a long way with implementing a working prototype. It's still very much a work in progress, and it's constantly crashing. But things are starting to come together a little bit, so I hope it doesn't crash during this demo, but we'll see. If it does, I have a backup video of when it was working at some point, but I've been working on it full-time for a long time now, so but we'll see what happens. So it works with MPS and Spoofax, but I'll come back to whether or not the approach could also work for other language workbenches. So what have I come up with? On this diagram, you see the architecture of what makes up the system setup surrounding my prototype. On the left-hand side, we have MPS, and on the right, we have Spoofax. And both of these language workbenches allow for real-time collaboration between their users by means of a plugin. For MPS, there's Modelix, which is being developed by some people at Idemis, a company in Germany. And for Spoofax, or rather for Eclipse, I should say, there is Seros, which is an open source plugin that has a small community working on it. Seros also works for Spoofax within Eclipse, but with some limitations due to the fact that Spoofax has a custom editor that Seros doesn't quite understand. But it works well enough for my purposes, and I believe that Seros could be made to work well with Spoofax with only some minor adjustments, but that's something for the future. So Modelix works with a server that stores the project data in the form of a key value database and processes model changes inside what it calls its model server. And Seros works with the XMPP protocol, which was formerly known as Jabber, which is usually used for instant messaging, but it also works here. And then you have Parsafix here in the middle. So both workbenches have ways for the users to collaborate on projects. And my idea has been to make use of this existing technology and write a program that essentially links Modelix with Seros. And I've called my program Parsafix for now because it parses between Seros and Modelix, and there's an F in there for Spoofax or something. I guess don't think about the name too hard. But this is the general idea. So let me demonstrate how it works. I have MPS and Modelix running locally on my computer. And I'll start by running Parsafix only on the MPS side to show you how that works. So that is started up. And here you see MPS. I just need to make things a little more visible for you. 1 second. All right, we're good to go. So here on the left, you see MPS, and on the right is a little web page that I've made to visualize what Parsafix is doing in the background. So MPS works using projectional editing, which means that users don't work directly on source code, but instead with a representation of some underlying data structure. And in the case of MPS, that data structure is an abstract syntax tree, which holds all the information of a model, like what components it's made up of and what their properties are. And before I've even modeled anything, you can see that there's already some sort of tree there, which Parsafix is picking up. That's because literally everything in MPS is part of the abstract syntax tree. So what you see here is basically the folder structure that we're going to be modeling in. So let's actually do some modeling. I'm going to keep it very simple today for multiple reasons, but I'm going to be using IDL, which is a little language that Oil makes use of, which is the larger language that I've been looking at. So IDL is very simple. It's used to model interfaces, and interfaces are defined within a module. And that's basically all it does. But you see, as soon as I've made a module, Parsafix recognizes that because the abstract syntax tree of MPS has been updated, and I'll show you that here. You didn't see it because it was too far down, but a new root node has been added of the type module. Might be a little difficult to see. And as soon as I add more things here, so let's say I give this a name, you'll see things being updated. And when I add a new interface, you also see that appear. And the same way I can add methods. So what is Parsafix doing here? Parsafix is basically pretending to be a ModelX client. So and initially it asks ModelX for the abstract syntax tree, which it then updates whenever it receives changed data via ModelX. And then it takes that MPS data and extracts the information from it that is needed to describe an IDL module in this case. So which interfaces does the module contain and which methods do the interfaces have? And it also keeps track of which piece of information corresponds with which MPS node, because they all get IDs, which you can see here, for example, which corresponds with the ID they have in the abstract syntax tree. And that's important for later. So that's the ModelX side. Now let me show you the other side, which would be the Spoofax side. So let me start that up. This real quick. Otherwise, you guys can't see. So here I have Eclipse with Spoofax running in it, and I've made a little demo folder for today. And down here we see the Seros plugin running. And once I've turned Parsafix on, you can see that the Parsafix contact comes online. A headless version of Seros is still in development, so that would mean that a Seros host, there would be a Seros host that is always online to which Parsafix then could connect to. But for now, we have to work with a Seros user functioning as the session host, which boils down to the same thing, but requires me to accept Parsafix into the session manually, which is fine for now. But let me do that and show you how this then works. So I'm going to start by adding a new file to my folder, and it has to be of the type oil. IDL files and oil files are oil. So once that's there, you see that Parsafix recognizes a new oil file appearing. And the big difference between MPS and Spoofax is that MPS has the projectional editing and Spoofax doesn't. Spoofax is essentially just a text editor that looks at the text and extracts information from it using syntax rules and other tricks. So Spoofax is pretty smart in this regard, and Parsafix would greatly benefit from the information that Spoofax generates about the text. But for now, as the prototype now stands, I don't make use of that yet. And I just apply some custom syntax rules to the text that I receive. It gets the job done, but obviously that could be improved upon. What I mentioned earlier was that Seros doesn't play very nicely with the Spoofax editor, so I'm just opening it as a regular text editor for now. But you'll see as I do so, as I start typing, Parsafix recognizes that text is coming in, but because it can't parse this to anything related to IDL, it just treats it as a comment for now. And as soon as I start typing something that makes sense to it, like module, it'll recognize it as a module and update its state, if you will. to that. So let me just model something real quick. Oh, there you see there was some trouble with the communication, so it replaces that with a question mark. Some data was dropped at some point. There were some performance issues. Let's give it an interface. Some modules while we're at it, or methods.
Noah?
Yes.
Is the text parsed by Spoofax? Or is that parsed by your tool and
yes, as I just said, that's being parsed by me at the moment.
okay.
I think there should be something possible there to get that information from Spoofax as well, but I haven't been.
Yeah, especially the fact that it recognizes that if you do not have a correct, according to your syntax input, that it recognizes it as comments is something that I think is very specific to your solution. Is that correct?
I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Could you repeat the question?
Well, you started by just putting in some text.
Yeah.
And then automatically it was recognized as being comment instead of something semantically interesting. And,
yes, exactly.
And that is something that you then also have to support in Spoofax in some way. Is that correct? If you want to, if you want Spoofax to do that, or
yeah, yes, and well, not sort of. In Spoofax, you can also just type whatever you like, and if it doesn't agree with you, it'll just underline it in red, but the text will still be there. So.
Okay, but then you still need to interchange the text, and not only the result that is recognized by Spoofax.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that the real question here is whether Parsafix is receiving a stream of characters from Saros, or is it receiving, something more structured?
Yes, it's receiving just pure text in this case.
The stream.
Yeah, just a stream. Yeah, exactly. Just a string. So that is something that I would like to see differently, but for now that is as it is. I'll get back to that in a second, by the way.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So let me see, where was I? Right, well, this demonstrates either side a little bit. Let me close this and get back to my presentation. So the point is that Parsafix extracts information from either side and then translates it to a data format, to its state, if you will, that can then be translated in either direction. So if MPS makes a change, Parsafix looks at the change in the abstract syntax tree, updates its state, and generates and sends an edit command to Spoofax. And if Spoofax makes a change in just its text, the same thing will happen, but in the other direction. So let me show you what it looks like when you put it all together. I hope it works, but we'll see. Otherwise, I have a video. It's been the debugging hell, let me tell you. But I will get there eventually. Start from scratch. Otherwise, it's unhappy with me. All right, so I've started up Parsafix, and starting out with a blank canvas, basically. We already have the small part of the MPS tree. So I need to add Parsafix to the session on the Eclipse side, and now we should be good to go. So I'm going to start by just adding a module on the MPS side. And when I do so, you see a new file appear here in Eclipse that relates to this, this new module node in the abstract syntax tree of MPS. And when I open it, you'll see that it says that a module node has been added. It has no name yet, but as soon as I start adding that in, that should appear. And it should also work in the other direction. Model X is very slow. That's a problem I've been running into, but it does work eventually. And now if I add something that Parsafix will recognize as a type of component in this language, it should send that back to MPS, and there it is. So I'm very happy that this is not crashing, because there's a lot of crashing that's going on. But this is the general idea, and this should work in either direction. So when a change is made on either side, Parsafix updates its state, and if it recognizes that one of the sides, that the change came from one side, it sends edit data to the other side, and vice versa. So that is pretty much what I have up till now in terms of the prototype. I still need to work on OIL, which is the bigger language, but for IDL, this is working for now. So let me get back to my presentation. Feasibility. The question is, of course, how feasible is this method? These are the comments I have about that. For starters, it works really well for MPS, because MPS provides us with a data structure that is very easy to generalize, the abstract syntax tree. All the information about a model is right there and can be extracted super easily. So Spoofax makes that a lot harder due to its data just being text. However, Spoofax is of course doing a lot of work behind the scenes to keep track of what kind of data a model contains, so it can check if the model is correct and things like that. If Parsafix had access to that data, it wouldn't have to pull apart the text itself to figure out what the model looks like. But the thing is, one of the main ideas of my approach was to leave all existing technologies as they were and simply build on top of that, because in that way, all existing technologies could simply continue developing on their own, and no adjustments would have to be made to make Parsafix work with them. Because of this, the approach only generalizes to other languages to a certain extent. In the case of MPS, nothing would have to change, because it simply provides us with another abstract syntax tree, which is always more or less the same, regardless of the language it's based on. In the case of Spoofax, Parsafix is a lot less generic, because new parsing rules would have to be implemented for it to work with a new language. And the way to make the approach more generic for Spoofax would be to add some functionality somewhere that allows Parsafix to request data about the model from Spoofax, along with the text, which is all it's getting right now. And I suspect that the groundwork for this already exists, but I haven't gotten around to that yet. And the question is, does the approach work for other language workbenches as well? Of course, I haven't tried this in practice yet, but I would say yes, depending on how the workbench represents the data. If it's just text, we run into the same problem as with Spoofax, and something custom would have to be made for every language. But seeing as every workbench has to construct some sort of data object to reason about its models, the data object could potentially be sent to Parsafix, and Parsafix could be made to work with it. And then I have something to say about an experiment that I would like to do about this, because for my thesis, I need to perform an experiment revolving around Parsafix. And the idea is to test whether or not a system such as Parsafix would work and has the potential to be adopted in a real life context. And initially my plan was to have multiple candidates collaborate on a simple modeling exercise where half of the candidates would work in MPS and the other would work in Spoofax. And then at the end, we could examine whether or not the model came out correctly and what the candidates thought about the experience. So put more explicitly, the experiment would do the following. It would analyze a real-time collaboration system prototype, Parsafix, for the purpose of evaluation with respect to performance and user experience from the viewpoint of DSL end users in the context of oil-based state machine modeling. However, I've been working really hard on this prototype for a very long time now, and I'm not entirely sure that I'll be able to get it working well enough for real-life candidates to work with in time. because I only have so much time to work on this, of course. And because there are some performance issues, first of all, like Monolix is very slow in its current state. And there are still a lot of bugs and potential for things to go wrong. So basically, Parsafix, as it now stands, works as a proof of concept, but technically there's still a lot of work to be done. And because of this, I was thinking that maybe it would be more feasible to run an experiment in the form of a simulation instead, perhaps by sending sequential and simultaneous edits from both MPS and Spoofax to Parsafix, and then checking if the resulting Parsafix state remains correct or what it would be expected to be. But I'm not entirely sure about this. So I was wondering if perhaps any of you would have some advice or feedback about that, how I could approach the experiment part of this.
No, I have many questions.
Okay, yes, that's fine.
Or maybe you can see them as suggestions. Before talking about the experiment, I would like to highlight one point about your current implementation of Parsafix, which I really like. So if you can go to the a couple of slides back to where you show the overall architecture of Parsafix, this.
Yep.
So now what I would like to highlight is that what happens inside Parsafix, so inside this box, it should be independent from MPS and Spoofax. Yeah. I'm proposing this. I already have a solution in mind, so don't panic. I'm proposing this because in the future, we don't know if we will have, instead of an MPS client, we will have a third branch, of people collaborating in this. So what I'm thinking is that within this box, the Parsafix box, we can have some, let's say, intermediate transformations that take as input the edits from MPS in this case, or the text. And then we have, some kind of adapters that we can add in the future. I'm also proposing this because the heuristics that you are applying for transforming the raw text that you are receiving from Spoofax into, let's say, semantic entities, we might, refine this over time.
Sure.
And I don't want them to depend too much on the rest of the system. So I'm thinking about some kind of, plugin-based structure inside Parsafix. Okay. So you can have, I don't know, stream parser, and then we can select the one that is fitting better with respect to the specific, let's say, configuration of Parsafix we need. Right. Or I'm thinking about beans declare that can be used inside Parsafix as a way to transform changes from the various modeling platforms. So I think that if inside Parsafix we have some intermediate steps, the clean ones, then it allows us to plug and play different heuristics or different model transformation languages, or I don't know, in such a way that we are not bound to MPS and the Spoofax words. And this actually also allows us to have a generic framework where, for example, we might even have other people using other MPS-based clients. And if everything passes through Parsafix, in those cases, when the changes are MPS to MPS, for example, then in the internal transformations are just identity transformations. They just, bring the changes along to the other side. Right. So I'm basically dumping what I had in mind when I was seeing this, but
yeah, no, it's a good idea. I like that. I'll write that down.
Because it's not a lot of work, but I think it opens a lot of opportunities for us in the project.
Yeah, for sure.
Bim, I see you want to talk.
Yeah. I have a lot of questions. Probably three, but they are related. One is about meta levels and this distinction between connecting to different technologies like Spoofax and MPS versus two different syntaxes or the same syntax. So of course, synchronizing in two directions only makes sense if you have some common language or some transformation between those languages, which works in two directions, so that everything makes sense. Except from just raw commands or text, but that's not the only part of what we want to solve here. Mm-hmm. So my question behind this is how does this work? So if you use the IDL language, then both sides needs to know the IDL language, and there needs to be some conformance and agreement on those structures, and otherwise that mechanism doesn't work. So is there a way to generate one from the other, or check whether the two syntaxes are consistent, or to assure that for a certain language or two languages in those two environments that will work? If you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. At the moment, no, that doesn't exist. The only requirement for Parsafix to work is that both MPS and Spoofax in this case have the same language implemented. And then Parsafix relies on the idea that if the two truly have the same language, then they will both boil down to the same components. And because
but that implies that you, on the Spoofax sides, have a syntax defined or implied, which results in a AST, which has equivalent structure as the structure that you have defined in MPS. Is that correct?
Yes, so more or less. Yeah.
More or less. or did you does Parsafix know the syntax, or is a separation between the generic, which is independent of OIL or IDL or whatever, and something that is specific for those syntaxes? How do I see?
It is, well, yeah, that is something that I've been thinking a lot about, because it is generic to a certain extent. Okay. Spoofax makes the whole situation more difficult because of the text thing, but the abstract syntax tree always gives you the same type of tree, in the sense that it gives you a node, what type of node it is, what its properties are, etc. So that if Parsafix has to know to a certain extent, or doesn't have to know anything. In this case, it only has to know, okay, I'm getting some tree, and those nodes always have properties and reference other nodes. That's all it has to know. So on the MPS side, that's pretty clear and pretty simple. But on the Spoofax side, things get complicated, because indeed it has to know syntax rules, because it has to take text and then somehow scrub the unnecessary parts away and then translate that to something that resembles a similar type of tree. And that is the whole issue here on the Spoofax side. Yeah. But that's a good point. Yeah.
But guys, let me tell you one thing, because I think that we can externalize this complexity to the specific needs that we have in what I was referring before as Parsifix plugins. So if you have an MPS-based editor that requires something specific, at some point we will have a dedicated Parsifix plugin for that. And then internally in Parsifix, we can have some kind of, unifier for the modeling elements that are traveling across the editors. I think we can, because of course we cannot manage all possible, corner cases that might happen.
No.
So.
No, fair enough. I think that would actually be a good solution to generalize things more, to make things more generic.
Okay, but I have two questions left.
Yes, go ahead.
The second one is about identity. You already pointed out that you have object IDs on both sides in some way. And do you is that something volatile, the connection between them, or is that something persistent, or how do you cope with both sites evolving persistently over time and reconnecting to synchronize, or is that out of the scope? And so how do you just generate new identities on the fly and keep them connected? Is that?
Yeah, good question. Because the assumption is that this is all happening in real time. So as changes are being made, they're coming in to Parsafix, which for the time being, the assumption is that, let's say we have a node in MPS, which represents a certain component, and we also have that in Spoofax. They represent the same thing. And if a change is made on either side, we're assuming that everything is coming in, that everything is happening sequentially and only one edit at a time. And that way it's relatively easy to keep track of which node we're talking about. However, if things were to change in that regard and like a bunch of different edits would come in at the same time and Parsafix would have trouble identifying between those, then we would start to see a problem. So in this very simple case, that problem sort of solves itself because things happen relatively sequentially in a way between nodes. So let's say if a node is moved, for example, on the Spoofax side, all we need to do is look at, okay, where was it like one step before, and then we can just link it to the MPS node again, which might be a little more complicated than we would like it to be. But for the time being, that works. But I think this is definitely something that would have to be expanded upon and made more, more adaptive to all kinds of different situations.
Yeah, because from if you have two ASTs on both sides, then you can generalize getting mutations across if you agree on the way that you map identities between them, of course. So that's something that you have to solve together. But how do you cope with those changes from MPS to the syntax? So if you have a single change, a property that is changed, or you add something, then on the textual side, you have a certain textual structure with indentation or spaces within, which are just arbitrary things that the user has put in. And then you have to mutate that part that is changed from the MPS side, but reuse the rest of it, or not? It doesn't. Or do you generate the text file completely again according to some pretty print? How do you incrementally change the text? How do you? It's an inverse matching that you have to do for that. Inverse parsing.
I see what you mean. I used to just generate the whole text anew. That worked wonderfully, but of course that was very not good for performance. So what instead, MPS generates IDs, which is wonderful. But what I use as IDs now on the Spoofax side are line and offset indexes, which are updated every time a change is made. So that's a solution.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. And then you can recognize, etc.
Where things are and where they've been moved.
Yeah, understand. Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Great demo.
Yeah. And this might open also for, you were talking about the experiment, and then maybe we can easily link to the topic of the experiment that you were bringing up, is that with this kind of architecture, we can experiment with different heuristics and with different, algorithms for matching modeling elements, for doing whatever we want to do, and then we can really quantitatively assess what happens at runtime. I think this, at least scientifically, is super interesting to benchmark different types of algorithms and internal gears of collaborative modeling and compare them. So getting more and more excited.
Could I also ask a question, maybe?
Yes.
First of all, Noah, thank you for your presentation. I think this was very good and nice piece of work, and you see that there is a lot of, let's say, hooks for further work in Bumble, which I think is really great. So I think you did a very good job there. You indicated that you experienced quite some instability / performance issues.
Yeah.
Do you have any, let's say, impression or idea of what may cause this? Because you're all running this on one and the same machine, so I would not expect too much performance issues or connection issues. So do you have any insight on that?
Yes, I think it is mostly due to the current state that ModelX is in, because I'm just running the model server that I got from the Git, and for some reason it's just slow. It's just a little Java application that.
And if you open it in the web browser, the ModelX editor, is it still similarly slow? Because I've not experienced this particular issue before. I've noticed other things about ModelX, but not the performance, let's say.
Oh, for me it is.
Then might be a general issue on your system.
Yeah, that could very well be. But I particularly notice, and I'm not entirely sure yet why this is, but that performance starts to go out the window when I start sending ModelX custom edits. So I'm sending it, I think, just change commands that are exactly the same as a real MPS client would send it, but then it starts to well, it doesn't seem to like that very much. It's also because the internal workings of ModelX are extremely complicated.
Oh, yes.
And I've spent a lot of time trying to figure that out. They do a lot of hashing to keep everything synchronized, and constantly check if those hashes are still in order, etc. So now I'm mimicking that on the Parsafix side, but there seem to be a lot of issues there.
There's a lot of incremental transformations going on there as well.
Yeah.
That makes it definitely a non-trivial exercise. So it's really good. It's a really good point that you got this to work. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I think
my 2 cents.
Yes. Thank you.
You use the Saros plugin in the Eclipse context.
Mm-hmm.
Is this plugin, let's say, generically applicable, or is it specific for a certain textual format, or could it also be used for anything else?
As it now stands, it's focused mainly on, well, it should be relatively generic within Eclipse, as long as what is being edited in Eclipse is being done within a text editor. So things like just Java programming, for example, that seems to work perfectly. But as soon as someone brings in a custom editor, the Spoofax editor, for example, that's it hasn't been built to work with that yet. So instead of just treating it as a text editor, it instead says, no, sorry, you can't work with this. And the thing is, it does already work with the Spoofax editor, but it doesn't, what's the word? It doesn't sync in real time. You have to save, and it only then sends the updates. So
okay.
It's relatively been developed relatively well so far, as I can tell, Saros, but it's not quite perfect yet.
I have a question, maybe more to the Bumble people, maybe also to Kozar. What if you would somehow, well, combine or may want to combine or integrate, I don't know what the exact word should be, with this GLSP story? I would, yeah. Is there a relation? This is maybe the first question. If so, then what the relation is? Because there is also an opportunity with GLSP that we are looking at, and Could GLSP be the one that also synchronizes the textual format, or how would that look like? So that's maybe something to investigate further.
Yeah, for now I haven't looked into GLSP. I'm still struggling with the MPS server and those things. Yeah, that is on the list. We will investigate GLSP as well, but I don't have that answer for now.
Yeah, okay, but I think the question that I pose here now is mostly what's the relation between GLSP and Saros, if there is a relation at all.
From a collaboration point of view, I think, yeah, I don't know much about Saros until now, but I think Saros is also meant for collaboration, whereas GLSP is not at all currently.
Okay.
It's really fixed currently to one client, and one client means one browser, so to say.
Okay. Then maybe Koza, we should add Saros to the list that we have been making.
Yeah. You mean the libraries and frameworks?
Yes.
Just to see different characteristics, like just to see just to collect the information from the web, let's say.
Yeah, I think it is good to add it to the list, and of course we have to evaluate it like the others to see what we are going to do with it, whether it ends up on the short list or not. But I think it's a relevant technology to at least look at or check.
Okay.
That was my my questions. Maybe somebody else has further questions or remarks.
Thanks, Bart. Other suggestions, remarks? I have another one, but I will keep it for myself to leave room to the others. Okay, then I go. Another point that I'm thinking about is about the stream from Spoofax to Parsafix, because also what I was thinking is that we might have locally into Spoofax some kind of adapter that takes the stream and locally, let's say, upgrades it into sets of edit operations. And in this way, to Parsafix, you don't get the whole stream, but you get already the cleaned up edit operations. And this might impact, you might have less data traveling through the network. You might have, some easier operations to do inside the Parsafix box. So another aspect that we might investigate is where we need to have this promotion of the stream of text that we get from Spoofax into the actual semantic elements. So yeah, that's just a reflection point. That I mean, we can experiment also on this, where to do the transformation from the text to the semantic elements.
Well, I might have missed that or not mentioned that, but what Parsafix gets from Saros is not constantly the whole string of text, but just the text that has been edited since it last sent a change edit. So if I add one letter, it doesn't send the whole text again, it just sends that letter.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that, for example, you might have, the module keyword, then with all the contents. If you change the name of the module, for example, in the Parsafix side, you might have only the information about the upgrade of the name of the module. So really the semantic change, not only the new characters that have been typed into the Spoofax editor. So
okay.
Yeah, not talking only about the performance, but also about how easy it could be then on the Parsafix side to map changes back to the MPS, for example.
Right.
So, but I mean, these are just reflection points that I myself still need to digest. But do we want to come back to the experiment quickly?
Yes.
So maybe.
Because what was I going to say about that? Obviously, I want to make it apparent that this idea has potential, or if it doesn't, that's the conclusion. But I think it does, so that's what the experiment should serve. But I'm still trying to think of a way to approach that without having to work on Parsafix for another year to get it working well enough for, like, you know, commercial use or whatever. So that's why I was thinking maybe a simulation is a better idea.
I think that a proper experiment on what you have now is another internship.
Right.
So that's my impression. But of course, since you have been building this a minimal experiment, just giving some insights about, for example, how it performs. I don't know, I think it's just about very simple metrics, like how much time you need to see a change on Spoofax to be fully reflected on the MPS side. Just even with some benchmark models, even really automatically, you know, without a real person behind the editor.
Right, just
so
keep
that
it,
could be
keep
already
it simple.
useful. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's a good point. Another internship wouldn't that would definitely work.
And maybe since you have been working on the internals of Parsafix until now, I think that I would give higher priority to fixing and to having it stable.
Right.
So I think it's more smart to do this, because otherwise having another person working on that is of course doable, or we can jump in and work on it. But of course, a change from your side, I think it requires a tenth of the time from a new person.
Fair enough.
I fully agree to this, Ivano. I think it is useful at this point to, I mean, we can come up with many other topics that we may want to be done, but at some point your time is up, Noah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's for you important that you also be able to finish your project to do your defense at some point.
Yes,
and
definitely.
not too far away from
Yeah.
now. So I think I agree with Ivano to focus on trying to improve a little bit the stability of the prototype, and also just deliver the prototype as being the end result of your work. And of course, you can propose a way to do an experiment as part of your, let's say, future work section in your report. Let's maybe phrase it like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But maybe somebody else can execute that, or maybe even the people in at Canon, or maybe in the bigger context in Bumble, in view of the idea of using oil also, for example, with as an example for WIM's declare technology. And we may also be combining that in a bigger, let's say, context, such an experiment.
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
Yep.
indeed.
Sounds good.
My proposal is that for the next in the next meeting in 2 weeks, let me think. I don't want to promise this, but okay, let's say it. I can come. I will talk with Noah, and I will come up with a proposal for what I was proposing before. So how to let's say promote what Noah did in the context of the Bumble project, in such a way that whatever other building blocks we have in the project, we can easily plug them into Noah's work. So Noah can be, you know, the communication middleware, let's put it this way, for the collaboration in BP5. And then I will try to find a way to integrate all the other building blocks that we have already. I will come up with an architecture. Let's put it this way.
That is perfectly fine with me. I think we have to be careful, let's say, or clear about what Noah still does in his master project, because yeah, he has I think 1 month or so left.
Yeah.
Which means writing down stuff.
Yes.
So I think Noah himself can probably cannot do much more, let's say, in terms of real implementation work. And we have to take that into account.
Yeah.
But of course, we can define and let's say publish.
But at least we know the intervention
results.
points.
Yes, as let's say future work, and then we can of course after, let's say, or I'm not sure what Noah is now going to do after his finishing his work, but I think after that we have to decide, okay, who will or may take up certain aspects of the future work items that have been identified. But I think for now, at least, it is important that we clarify what Noah will still do in his master project, so that we sort of protect him over going over the deadlines for his project.
I completely agree. I mean,
okay,
we don't want to punish him because he did a good job.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, but I will actually, me and Koza can follow up with Noah next week, and we can fix the milestones, and yeah, just agree about an easy takeover from the Noah's points.
Sounds good.
Yes, what is definitely interesting and important, I think, is that the work that you did, Noah, is somehow available, of course, to CPP and to the VU, but I think we may want to use your MPS/ModelX implementation of oil also in combination with the Bumble use case of Vim. This is something that we still have to discuss, but at least that was an idea that we had last week or the week before, I can't remember exactly. So that would mean that it should be available in some way. And it is still the intention that oil becomes open source, and then, well, there shouldn't be any problem anyway. But at least it should be shareable within the Bumble context at this point. So make sure that there is somehow a package or whatever available, so that we can have as a bit of documentation. And so this is also part of the finalization of your work. It's not just maybe writing the document, but also, let's say, this kind of handover.
Yeah.
We have the GitHub repo. So.
Yeah. Also, Louis van Rol should, of course, know how to use your stuff.
Yes. Yes, I'll make sure of that's all available. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, sorry that we are now talking a little bit about finalizing your project and not so much about the Bumble stuff, but I think it was a good moment to mention this.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left. What I will do is I will summarize a bit some of the action points that we discussed now in the last 5 minutes. You will find them in the agenda in the minutes of the meeting, the one that I already linked at the beginning. And I think for today it's enough. Do you have some final thoughts about this? Okay, good. I will put also the recording of this demo in the Google Drive, so you will find it there. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, people. Have a
Thank you
nice
very
weekend.
much.
Thanks for the demo.
Thank you, Noah.
Yes.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.